Hey, it's Michael. And before I get into today's episode, I have just a quick announcement for you. I'm actually taking the next month off from the show, the month of August 2023. I won't be publishing new episodes until early September 2023. And truth be told, it's for a couple different reasons. One is that I've actually been podcasting since 2015, pretty much nonstop, and I would like a little bit of a break as my kids go back to school and as summer winds down here in Colorado. Secondarily, I am working on some changes to the show. Nothing major, nothing huge, but I want some time to kind of think through how I want the show to progress and change and grow over time. And I would like just some time away from producing episodes to do that. But rest assured, I will be back in September with new episodes. I've already got them recorded, so they're just waiting to get out there, but I'm going to take a month off. I appreciate your understanding. Please continue to listen to the show, share the episodes with other people who may not have heard the show, and I promise I will be back in a month. So, with that announcement out of the way, let's get into today's episode. I have a question for you, as always. Does it ever feel like the whole world's addicted to drama? Welcome to the follow up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we communicate well. What we have been taught about communication and what has been modeled and incentivized through our culture has left us in a place where we know how to exert our ideas and opinions and beliefs onto each other, but we miss the other half of conversation, the extraction. My aim with this show is to bring you perspectives and ways of looking at issues or topics that perhaps you haven't considered before. To teach you how to ask curious questions, how to seek understanding over certainty, and how to listen and give space so that ultimately you might become a better communicator. I'm a former journalist who believes everyone has a story to tell, and it's only when we ask questions and listen that we reveal what connects us as humans. Our dreams, our desires, our experiences, our ideas, and what we stand for, rather than what we are against. If I were to ask, do you know someone addicted to drama? I'm going to guess there's a good chance someone's name and face just immediately popped into your mind. Maybe it's a parent or a sibling who always seems to have a beef with someone. Each week there's someone new who has wronged them or no one is on their side. Maybe it's that one coworker who is chaos from the moment they show up in the morning until the moment they leave. Maybe it's you? Ooh, I know that one stings a little bit, doesn't it? But stick with me here. Because in the immortal words of those epic modern day poets, the Black Eyed Peas, I think the whole world's addicted to the drama, only attracted to things that'll bring you trauma. And no, I'm not going to try and rap that or sing that. But as you're about to hear, the Peas, they weren't too far off. My guest in this episode is Dr. Scott Lyons, a psychologist, a renowned body-based trauma expert, and the author of the book, Addicted to Drama: Healing Dependency on Crisis and Chaos in Yourself and Others. And as you'll hear from Scott, drama addiction is a very real thing, far beyond a label you might throw out when you're annoyed by someone's behavior. And like so many other addictions, it's often wildly misunderstood how it starts, what it's actually masking, and ultimately, what's needed to overcome and resolve it. Now, Scott himself is an admitted, recovered drama addict, so he knows what it takes to not only recognize drama addiction, but how to recover from it. Scott, you describe stress as a big bad monster that we often don't really understand all that well, but it is critical to understanding drama addiction.
Mhm.
So let's break it down. What do we need to understand about stress and its complexity to begin to understand drama addiction?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. And by the way, I love the name of your podcast, the follow up question. And I just want to like identify that one of my biggest relational kinks with people is good follow up questions. And so I just when I was invited to your podcast, I was like, oh yes, I'm really excited to talk about you know and have great follow up questions. So stress.
Hopefully I can deliver. Hopefully I can
Yeah,
deliver.
I'm please don't disappoint me. I mean, I really get turned on by follow-up questions intellectually, so, that's why I'm a therapist.
We'll make it happen.
So, yeah, stress. It's in the media, it's a really hot topic. It's for pop psychology, it will grab your attention, and especially if we kind of dramatize the conception of it. So it's like, "Stress is gonna kill you." In fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. Stress makes you sick. Nope, that's also not true. And it's a very shortcutted understanding of what is happening biologically, and it gets clicks. It's clickbait. It's not actual science. And that's a really important understanding because what gets clicks suddenly becomes the popular domain of science, and then we think that's actually science and it's not. And why that's really fundamentally important is because if you didn't have stress, you would be dead. How's that for dramatic?
Well, there you
Yeah?
go.
Stress is not our enemy. Stress is our biological process of adaptation. We have a stimulus, we have a response. Our process of adapting to a stimulus, whatever it is, whether it's me waving to you, whether it's me throwing a ball at you, whether it's me yelling at you, it doesn't matter. A stimulus is a stimulus. How we are able to adapt to it is our stress response. So the more adaptive we are, the more resilient we are. And the less adaptive we are, the more likelihood we will be sick, that we will be diseased, that we will be dysregulated. And so when we make stress the enemy, even just the word, like if I say the word stress to you, most people have a physiological response. They get heated, they get quote unquote triggered by the word, and that's even before unpacking what it actually is. So sometimes we have to like break through these pop psychology ideas of what something is that create a bias, which create a physiological effect, and actually go, wait, what is this? Because some people actually become addicted to stress, which means in some weird way they're becoming addicted to a part of this biological process of adaptation. So, the first part of a stress response is a whole release, a cascade of energy through your whole body. It's called activation. That energy gets you ready to mobilize, which is another word for adapt to the circumstances. Then we deactivate, meaning we release some of that excess energy that's coming in. And we go into more of a rest and digest process, which means we're metabolizing the emotional process that came with the stimulus. Yeah. And then we go into our fourth and final stage of a stress response, which is called restoration. And restoration is the rebuilding of energy, mitochondria, for example, to keep being in this process of adaptation. When we are in the window and capacity of this process, this cycle of stress, we are healthy. When something is thwarting or challenging our ability to complete this cycle, that is where we get illness. That is where we get the diseases associated with stress. It is not stressors that make us sick. It is our inability to complete our biological process of adaptation that makes us sick. And like I was saying, this is the really juicy part, right? That some people get addicted to the first and kind of second part of a stress response. That activation, that first part, it releases a whole bunch of energy. You feel alive. If you've ever gone running, that's a stress response on your body, right? You feel
Mhm.
alive. You feel like vibrant. There's blood pumping through you. There's hormones. It's like a dance party of hormones. You are actually releasing endorphins, pain relief. You're getting pain relief from this first part of a stress response because it is preparing you for whatever pain you might endure as part of adaptation. So some people thrive off this. They feel alive in this first aspect of the stress response. And the rise of that energy brings them above a threshold of numbness. So they start to feel like they feel in the world. Otherwise, for most of us, if you've ever been depressed, if you've ever had a really crappy day, you know what it's like to kind of feel like numb, or after a heartbreak, after some time, you feel kind of numb. There are people in the world, specifically who have had trauma, that adapt by creating a numbness, a wall of protection. And they disconnect, they dissociate from their body to not be consumed by the pain of the trauma. And like as a kid, I referred to myself to my parents as a walking ghost.
Mhm.
I had
Mhm.
so much trauma as a kid that I was dissociated, I was disconnected from my body. I was numb. And the only thing that would help me feel alive in the world, out of that malaise, out of that kind of depression, out of that disconnection, was the pain relief and the energy spurt that came with a stress response. And in feeling more alive, you also get a false sense of belonging. And so the brain goes, holy shit, you feel belonging, you feel pain relief, you feel sensation, you feel more alive. We got to reward this. We got to go, yes, do more of this, please, so that we can keep existing in the world. And that's the process of becoming addicted to stress. And because the other little piece is addiction, one of the hallmarks of addiction is that there is a void. So I talked about when we have trauma, we disassociate, we disconnect. It's like we vacate our body, and in its place, there is a void, a hole. And so we shove whatever we can in to relieve the pain of that void, whether it's cocaine or alcohol or gambling or sex or stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that helps us fill the void to feel that much less disconnected in the world. So that's stress. And that's why it's important to understand what stress is and why it actually, when we deconstruct it, there's an aspect of it that people get attached to, dependent on, as part of their own sense of preservation and survival in the world.
All right, Scott. So here come the follow-up questions, and
Okay.
I've got I mean, in that answer, there are so many. Okay,
Let's hear 'em.
you referred to yourself as a walking ghost as a child.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think the best way to understand how someone is going through this is to hear someone's story. So I wanna
Yeah.
hear yours.
Yeah.
When you refer to yourself as a child as a walking ghost, what happened? Why did you refer to yourself that way?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a family of inconsistency. There was a lot of love and there was a lot of violence. And there was never time and space to feel safe. You had to keep hyper vigilant. Whether it was the next door slam or the next slap in your face or the next hug, there was never enough consistency to be like, I can rest, I can settle. It's okay to find stillness. And, there was a lot of trauma in the generations of my family. Um, and I grew up as a kid I had a lot of learning disabilities, a lot, severe learning disabilities. Um, I was a queer kid, getting shoved in lockers, getting punched in the face for just being who I was. I was made fun of for how stupid I was by teachers. I was misunderstood in ways that, like, looking back, I'm just like, I teach all over the world, and I'm like, I can't imagine not being compassionate to another human being who's clearly in a challenging process, or perhaps just doesn't think in a typified way. um, I just can't even fathom it. But maybe that was just what the 80s and 90s were like in America. Um, and so there was just a lot of pain. I also had a lot of, I mean, I also had a lot of food allergies in which I was constantly uncomfortable and had migraines. We didn't, this was way before it was cool to have like celiacs. And
Oh, I have it. It's not cool.
no, I have it too. I know. I have celiacs. Like, and it was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's popular. It's like there's tests. It's amazing. There's food
Mhm.
sensitivity books. It's great. I grew up as a child where we didn't have any of that. And
Yeah.
the idea of being allergic to gluten was like so foreign. And we also had dial-up internet. I don't know if
Shocking.
hopefully, what is that? Um, and there was constant physical discomfort. I was bloated. I felt headachy. I couldn't focus. I was my such brain fog. So really the combination of all of those things, like my body was not a safe place to be. My home was not a safe place to be. I vacated wherever and however I could as a means of survival. And we don't even, as kids, we don't think about it. We just evolutionarily are designed to do that.
Mhm. So then I think the question becomes, Scott,
Yeah.
in that world where you're vacating your body, as you just
Yeah.
said, you talked earlier about rising above that threshold of numbness,
Yeah.
creating a numbness within yourself.
Yeah.
To the person listening right now who's saying, okay, then why would you introduce drama into your life? That I think is the question that
Yeah.
naturally flows from that. If that's your
Yeah.
baseline,
Yeah.
why introduce drama into it?
Yeah. So I'm going to reverse the question a little bit, or
Please do.
transfer the
Yeah.
question, which is, what would you do to avoid the pain?
Mhm.
It doesn't, drama is not about making sense, it's about making sensation. And what sensation creates a distraction from the underlying pain? You have a little ache, you go running. Suddenly you don't have an awareness of the ache for at least an hour or two until that pain relief, natural pain relief comes in. You have a bad day, you go home and you have sex with your partner who you love, which is also a pain reliever. And it's distracting. It's not like the pain disappeared, it doesn't disappear. There's just these biological ways of distraction. Drama is free. You can seek it, create it, manifest it, make it wherever you go. It's really hard to find cocaine in the middle of the desert, my friends. Yeah. Or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you can't gamble where there's no place to gamble. Alcohol closes at 7 p.m. on a Sunday in Rhode Island. Where you going, like it's what I'm saying is and as a kid, it's a much more viable drug of choice. It's accessible. You can go watch it on TV. You can go watch it from your parents. You can go make it. You can go stir things up. You can go gossip. And here's a better, maybe an easier way for most people to understand it, because it might shock us that we all have the biological propensity to be addicted to drama. And for example, I don't know about you, Michael, but have you ever gone to a meditation class or a yoga class, or taken a bath and found like you were suddenly thinking about an ex, or playing out a fight with someone, an argument with someone where it hasn't even happened, or thinking about work and it's your weekend, or just even thinking about the groceries, or you're sad and you go play a sad song, you flood more sadness, or you create some type of stirring that doesn't allow you to find that stillness, that ease, that comfort, that settling that could be in those environments, like a bathtub, a meditation class, a yoga class. You're walking down the street and you find that you're rushing, but you don't actually have anywhere to go. You're not stopping to smell the roses. You're not stopping to take things in. You're rushing for no apparent reason. It's almost like a reflexive urgency, which is part of our urgency culture. All of these are the mechanism. It's called an activation reflex. So if we remember back to the stress cycle, first step, activation. An activation reflex is the opposite of a relaxation reflex. Yeah. So relaxation reflex is we start to settle. Oh, our eyes widen, our blood pressure changes, our organs settle a little bit further into gravity. Yeah. And we go more into rest and digest state where we can then go into restoring energy.
Hmm.
But for so many of us, and this might be shocking, we actually have the opposite, which is an activation reflex. The moment we start to settle, the moment we get closer to quietness, stillness, which means we're getting closer to contact with ourselves and the underlying traumas that we have been avoiding, there is a reflex that stirs us up, which is why when you're meditating, all of a sudden you're starting to think about something that's maybe a little agitating or stressful. That is an activation reflex. Now, when you live in a constant process where that is the case, where settling feels dangerous, where peace feels dangerous, where coming into contact with yourself feels dangerous inherently, then you had this reflex that goes and seeks or creates the drama, the chaos, and the crisis that ensures that you will stay at some level of hypervigilance so that you can be in constant protection of yourself, that you will not be in harm's way, so to speak, or that you will be ready to navigate the next potential threat. And that's an inherent evolutionary process that so many of us might actually recognize ourselves doing. When was the last time you really let yourself find peace? And how are all the ways that you distract yourself or pull yourself unconsciously out of that? That, my friends, is all part of the same physiological process of an addiction to drama.
One of the things I struggle with, Scott, is I, for instance, yesterday was Father's Day. I have my two children. We went on a hike, and then coming home after that hike, you would think, we hiked 7 miles as a family. My
Yeah.
tendency or my desire would want to be to just sit.
Mm.
But there is something within me that says, no, that's unproductive. Don't do that. Go do, go be, go create. And I love it. I think I thrive on it a lot. But am I fooling myself, Scott?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what is the cost?
Mm,
Great. I love that you're creative. And it's a good question. It's not, are you harming yourself, but could you do its opposite? Could you allow yourself to settle? What happens in the settling? Do you find yourself in boredom and anxiety, which are the two main symptoms of a withdrawal from stress, from
mm,
being in chronic states of stress?
mm.
So what do we do when we find we're in a withdrawal process? We go bite the dog that bit us. We go stir up some shit until we get enough of that stress response. And the challenge is that like any other drug, and the same is true with stress, we build up a tolerance level for it. We need more to feel more. We need more to get the high that truly does come as part of that activation aspect of the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say I get bored in that state, but I
Well,
don't know,
my
I think I'm getting
friend,
better at it, but
I think you just found out you're a drama dabbler.
Okay, so but that sets up my next question.
Yeah.
Why is it so easy then for us to identify drama in
With other
others,
people.
but not
Mm,
ourselves?
yeah. Every time I lecture, I love asking the question, and I just came back from New York where I did this. And I said, "All right, raise your hand if you know someone addicted to drama." Every single person in that audience raises their hand. Sometimes they even, like, stand up and shake their hands.
Wave both
Like,
hands.
yeah, like, with roll hands. "Yes, my mom, my sister, my" whatever. And then I ask, and who in here is addicted to drama? And it's usually like one sort of brave soul that they're like not sure, but they're like, I'm not, is never me. And if we do the statistical analysis and we all know someone addicted to drama, guess what? That's also to some degree, statistically speaking, the probability is high that you are included in that. And it's not easy to recognize we're making mountains out of molehills, that we're exaggerating and intensifying and pouring fire on our own stress because from our own internal perception, it is valid. The exaggeration, the intensity, the urgency, it's all valid. The victimization that we feel. So, what happens in trauma is, we focus often in trauma work on the impact itself. And that's interesting. Like, how does the body respond? How does the mind body respond to the impact of an event or the absence of an event like love? But what we often don't think about is what happens in the interstitial space between one trauma and the next possible trauma. And what does happen in that is our sensory organs change. Literally, the way you smell, the way you see, the way you touch, the way you feel, the way your perception of time all changes to filter in more negative information. And because negative information means essentially that we're filtering in more possibilities of what potential threats are out there that could harm us.
Mm-hmm.
So we become attuned or vigilant. It's like someone is turning our TV channel of all of our senses to possible threats. And if that is all you see, if those are the lenses of the glasses you wear, then all the other things that are positive about the world and good will not be filtered in. So when you hear someone who's addicted to drama say, why is there always bad things happening? Why do bad things always happen to me? Or, it's always something. And it's true because that is the only thing that's coming through those lenses is the negatives, because that is what they need to be able to see to protect themselves in the world. And there's this thing called regulation. Yeah, self-regulation. It means that we are able to utilize the correct or optimal amount of energy, emotion, and attention to our process of adaptation, right? That's what we mean by self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
I'll repeat it because it's really important to get
Yeah.
that we have the optimal amount of energy, attention, and emotion towards our process of adaptation in a stress response. Yeah. Now, if it was never modeled in our household, if we didn't have the time, space, permission, support, love, consistency, what's in our household that helped us develop our internal barometer for this, then what happens is we live in a chronic state of dysregulation, especially if we experience trauma. So we become dysregulated, meaning we don't utilize the optimal amount of energy, attention, and emotion to adapt. So what looks like normal for us, if we're dysregulated, it's like, of course, this makes sense that I just blew out a birthday candle with a fire hose. Of course, it makes sense that it started raining, so I went to a tornado shelter down the block because that's the dysregulation. But internally, it's like because of what I'm filtering through the world, and because I don't have the barometer to truly measure the optimal amount of energy, attention, and emotion, I'm doing things that seem disproportionate between the stimulus and the response. So on the outside, we would go, "What the hell are they doing? Oh my gosh, what? This makes no sense." Like if you ever had a friend and you're just like, "Wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
How did I get involved?"
Right.
And like those type of things we say when we're around people who are addicted to drama, or like, "What are you doing? That makes no sense. Your reaction is so stupid. You're so sensitive, hypersensitive, whatever." On the inside, for the people who are addicted to drama, it makes total sense. And so if you were to say to them, why are you over exaggerating? They would say, I'm not. I am behaving and reacting in a proportionate way to how I'm perceiving the world.
Is that lack of an ability to regulate appropriately, is that stress response to the stressor, is it most often developed or underdeveloped in childhood? Can it happen to us later in life? Or is this mainly, are we looking at a, hey, this is a early formative years
It's
thing that
both.
crops up?
It's both.
Yeah.
Um, I think once upon a day, time in the world of science, and we used to think, okay, if it happened to you as a kid, you can't change it. Like, or if it didn't happen to you, if you weren't dysregulated as a kid, you'll be fine as an adult. We now know that that's not true. You
Mhm.
can have severe traumas as an adult and lose the secure skill sets you had as a child. Yeah. It is easier to get them back if you had them as a child, but
Mm.
you can still lose them as an adult. So there's this little thing called co regulation. And when babies are born, this might surprise all of us, they don't have all their capacities and facilities of their nervous system readily available. They cannot regulate their energy, attention, and emotions as babies. We as babies, they as babies, rely on caregivers to literally hold us,
Mhm.
create containment, and model what it is to self regulate. We learn to self regulate through our parents who are caregivers modeling in what's called co regulation. Their nervous system surrogates our nervous system to find um, ease and calming and metabolization of our emotions. And if we don't have that, if we don't get that, whether it's the challenges of caregivers, the ecosystem, our environment is too chaotic for even a caregiver to offer that, then we don't learn that as a child. We don't not just learn it; it's embody it. And so that's the challenges if in early developmental processes, and then as adults we can lose those skills. I mean, I don't know about you. Have you ever gone through a shitty breakup?
It's been years now. I've been married for coming up on 16 years. So
Oh,
thankfully I haven't been
oh
there, but
wow.
in a long
Well,
time. But yes, I've been through
okay,
a
you've been.
time or two.
I had a breakup, and I wrote about it in the book in my late 20s, and I felt like I was a functional human being. And I lost all the functionality that I thought I had. This breakup, it just so dysregulated me. It was so enmeshed with this human being. It was so toxic. And it's like all the skill sets I thought I had as a young adult from meditating and going to therapy for so long just flew out the window. And it wasn't just the breakup. I was going through some severe medical issues. I was in grad school. I was directing a big opera. There were a lot of things I was juggling that suddenly went wrong, so to speak, and kind
Mhm.
of fell on top of me. Um, kind of, and so yes, we can as adults lose our capacity to self-regulate and truly have that optimal energy, attention, and emotional um, capacity to functionally adapt in the world. And so when we don't functionally adapt in the world, what it looks like is a very dramatic, performative experience, especially for if we're watching someone else. Yeah.
Scott, I think what made it clear to me was the story of Maria the fighting fish in the book. That was the point where I was like, "I get it now. I understand, this makes sense to me." Can you relay that to the audience so they can experience the same kinda
Yeah.
come to realization moment that I had?
Yeah. It's not a real story of a fish. I'll just say that
Right.
'cause I remember having this conversation with my editor, and she was like, "I don't under like, what,"
Is
like,
Maria
she was like, "I
real?
Googled Maria fishes." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 I made that up. Maria, I just named the fish Maria because I thought it was cute." Um, so this is a story about a fish that grew up, developed these tough scales, these tough way of operating in a very chaotic ocean. For example, where there's a lot of predators, constantly having to be vigilant of the predators and the storms and all the other factors that happen in a chaotic environment. And in this story, they talk about Maria, the fighting fish. She gets captured by a little fisherman and brought back to this tranquil pond, and this environment is a direct conflict with the environment to which she had normalized. And her whole system, her whole body, the armoring of her body have developed out of that ecosystem. So you place her in this tranquil pond with all these tranquil fish, and soon she starts to stir things up. She feels out of sync with the world of this pond. So she starts circling the pond really quick to try to create these tornadoes, these storms in the water. She starts picking fights with the other fish. Yeah. And when there is the moments where there's that tornado in the water and the fish are at each other, then suddenly she feels like, life is right. I
She's at
feel in
home.
sync. I feel at home.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what those with an addiction to drama do. They pull you in like a tornado into their chaos. We all know what that's like. We all of a sudden you're like, whoa, someone just pulled me into their shitstorm, their drama, their chaos. And it's like, why am I involved? And you don't even recognize you're involved until you're exhausted afterwards. And there's two reasons they do that. The first is you become an extra battery pack of energy. Your activation that happens as you get roped into their drama gets it's like putting fuel on their fire so they can keep going, so they can keep distracted, so they can get the pain relief, so they can stay above the threshold of numbness. Yeah.
Mm.
And it is the closest thing that they can use to feel intimacy. So every single person I interviewed who has an addiction to drama, and frankly, most people in the world, if you've been looking at any of the research that's come out about loneliness, feels inherently lonely. They feel like they don't belong in some capacity. And frankly, that's a huge percentage of our population right now.
Mhm.
So when intimacy feels dangerous because it requires vulnerability. And vulnerability means that we will not be ready for the next potential threat. So we wall up and we make sure we never um, have that intimacy that would make us too vulnerable to being attacked, to being annihilated. And so the closest thing that feels like a sense of belonging is to rope people in, called drama bonding. You pull people in to your tornado, and especially if they have something similar in the subject matter. Like if you and I both hate, I don't know, water. Just fucking water. And so like I know that, and I seek you out, and it's easier to pull you in. So it's easier drama bonding. Yeah. The
We s
moment.
we see that at work a lot, don't we?
Oh
Where
yeah.
we're our boss, for
Yeah.
instance, becomes the
The
thing that
enemy.
we're
Yes.
bonding against.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, or the school teacher for
Mhm.
teenagers, or yeah, exactly. And that we're throwing logs on each other's fire. We do that as part of gossiping
Yeah.
all the time. And what it gives us is a false sense of belonging. That's what gossiping does as well. So I'm pulling you into my drama as a drama addict. I feel, ooh, there's more energy here because there's more logs on the fire. And I feel some sense of belonging. And here's the interesting thing. One of the strongest forms of bonding is drama, is trauma.
Mhm.
Trauma and drama. Yeah. So there's a study that came out of Australia. There were two groups of individuals, two groups, and one group had to stick their hand in really cold water, and like the kind of cold that burns your hand, momentarily stings your hand. And what they found was the group that had to put their hand in cold water and felt pain together bonded so much more quickly and was more efficient in the next activities that followed than the group that had neutral water. They didn't really bond. They didn't have anything to bond around.
Mhm.
So, in this way, inherently, as part of our biological evolutionary process, trauma, pain, trauma is a bonding agent, it's a social glue. And it also is a currency of love for a lot of us who grew up in houses of chaos. So, what I mean by that is, you know, think about what got you the attention you desired as a kid. Was it when you were sick? Was it when things were wrong? When things were not, when upset or frustrating or bad? Did that get you more of the attention than when things were good?
Mm.
And that becomes the currency of love that we mimic through our entire life based on the sense that we neurologically wire. If things are not right, if things are unsettled, if things are wrong, I will get more attention, more love. And so I look for those things. I talk about those things. And the things I look for and I talk about, I physiologically feel. So if
Mm.
that is my life because I'm seeking love, then I am in a constant state of unrest, unsettledness.
So, Scott, the entire time, and you've alluded to it, the entire time I was reading your book,
Yeah.
I had the words of the modern day poets, the Black Eyed Peas, running through my head, which is, I think the whole world's addicted to the drama.
I don't even know that song. Wait,
From the song, Where
can
is
you
the
sing it to
Love?
me?
Oh, God. No, it's a rap. He just says the line in there in the song, Where is the Love? I think the whole world's addicted to the drama.
Oh my god, I totally forgot about that song.
You need to go listen to it.
Immediately. I'm actually gonna just leave the podcast
Yeah,
now and,
right. Please
how
don't.
do I
Please
pause
don't.
this?
This is so good. This is so good. Uh, so, but I had this feeling, this, and
Yeah,
literally I did have that song going through my head that I'm
I
like,
love that.
this feels like we're being set up by the culture of what we have, the technology that we have access to,
Yeah,
the negative information that is constantly
yeah,
stimulating us, bombarding us. The fact that probably all of us need therapy and so few of
yeah,
us get it from our childhood trauma.
yeah.
It feels like we're fighting an enormous addiction to drama
Mm.
across the board. Am
Yeah.
I being dramatic in that statement?
Oh, totally, you're being dramatic, but you're also right.
Touche.
Touche. No, it's a great setup. So 30, 40 years ago, when I was not born yet, no, I'm just kidding. Uh, you know, before the internet, before the interwebs,
Mhm.
and this was part of my research. Like, there we would, there were less particular cases of what people, there's no official diagnosis of an addiction to drama. So the part of the research is looking at notes, essentially, of how people, without diagnosing, identified symptoms, clusters of symptoms that, and trends of that. So prior to the interwebs, I just like saying interwebs.
It's like
um,
saying the Facebook.
the
It used
Facebook,
to
the
be the
interwebs. I
Facebook.
like aging myself even though I'm not that old, because maybe you'll think like I'm older and wiser.
Old
I
and
don't know.
wise.
Old and
You don't have the
wise.
white beard, so I
I
can't.
know.
Yeah.
If I stopped doing Botox, people would realize finally that I'm old and wise. Um, so before the interwebs, there were less cases. There was less cases of an addiction to drama, and now we're seeing it on an endemic scale.
Mhm.
So what we're realizing is the systems of media and specifically social media have replicated those specific conditions that create an addiction to drama on this mass scale. And one of the ways we can unpack that is through what's called an intentional economy. An intentional economy it was a theory that came out in the 80s that basically said your attention, your focus is the most important commodity in terms of marketing.
Yes.
Marketing then leads to sales, sales profits, capitalism, right?
Yes.
So capitalism, our entire economy is run on the commodity of your attention. Brilliant. It's really smart idea, but it's not actually the whole picture. Because what an economist understands is that is that, but what a neurophysiologist understands is the mechanisms to what creates and maintains and sustains attention. And that, my friends, is a stress response. So we don't live in an attentional economy, we live in a stress economy because it is the stress response, specifically the activation, that in that jumping of energy, that cascade of energy I talked about, the amygdala turns on that says, what do we got to focus on? Literally, your eyes go from more peripheral focus to central focusing. Your attention narrows in on the stimulus that is creating the stress response. Brilliant. So we don't live in an attentional economy, we live in a stress economy. And the more that people are able to find the tools to keep you activated, revved up, the more that they can maintain and capture your attention and sell you what they want. Brilliant. It's manipulative as shit. It's brilliant. It's the way the economy works. And
As a marketer full time, you are putting me on the spot here.
oh yeah, yeah. No, I know.
But go
You
on.
know, let's not beat around the bush. That's
Yeah,
this is what happens. And
absolutely.
here's the challenge: tolerance. In the same way I talked about, there are five main things that make an addiction, and one of them is tolerance. Another one is withdrawal. You need more to feel more. And what we've identified in the research is that years ago, what you need to get a certain level of activation to capture your attention is a fraction of what is required now. A fraction. I feel bad for you as a marketing person because you actually have to come up with more dramatic language, more dramatic imagery, more dramatic scenarios, all these tools of drama. So, more intensified language, more violent images, more sexualized images, all these things that capture our attention. You have to rise above the threshold of our current culture norm, tolerance level to get and maintain attention. And then as it's so we our tolerance level as participants in this economy it is being forced on us. We don't even recognize that we are being flooded with stress as a way of pursuing the economy, of pursuing capitalism essentially. And um, and so it's a forced level, it's a forced process of becoming addicted to drama because you are building a tolerance level. Yeah. And you are also part of the rat race. You want attention, you want to be seen, you want to be recognized. Yeah. And
Mhm.
you are competing with 5 billion other people in the world to be seen, which is a fundamental primal need that we have as human beings. And so what do? We find what captures other people's attentions. I use more exaggerated words in my captions. I use specific imageries. I create a social avatar of myself, a false version of myself that is what gets the likes. Yeah. And then I have to do more to maintain my audience's interest. And so I'm also participating in the same activation or stress economy. And in the same way all addictions work, we get those hits, you know, that hit of chaos, that hit of crisis, that hit of stress, we hit that hit of alcohol, whatever it is, that drug hit, and then we will go through withdrawals. And that is why we also see an increase of boredom, anxiety in our culture as well. And we call it, and then we got to do something. We got to do
Mhm.
something. We get revved up to make sure that we don't go in to that anxiety and that boredom, and we call that an urgency culture. But really, that's just us revving ourselves up to stay out of the anxiety, the boredom, and the deeper contact to all the things we haven't been able to process because the world around us keeps pulling ourselves and our attention out of ourselves. So we are leaving behind an enormous amount of unprocessed emotional baggage.
And
Shit.
we respond to
How's that for you?
we respond to negative stimuli more, don't we?
Yes. Oh, yeah,
Than
yeah, yeah.
positive. Yeah.
Yeah. If I show you violent images, if I show you like if I use really intensified words, if I put exclamation marks, um, the news, and marketing people are smart. They're not dumb. They know this. That we know that negative imagery, more intensified stories will maintain your attention. So if you're watching the news, know that it is performative. It is using the tools of drama, and it is performative. It is exaggerated to make sure that it captures your attention. You will more likely, if they're talking about stay tuned to make sure that you don't die in a fire, it's much more likely that you will stay watching the news during the commercial breaks than if they say, here's a few tips to make sure you get through this summer happy and healthy. Yeah. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's a boring title, so it's important because it's not just that those titles, those ways of phrasing things, are in and of itself, because the way that they are being phrased has a physiological effect on us. If I say to you, stay tuned so you don't die in a fire, you have a stress response. Your amygdala goes, oh shit, I got to pay attention.
Mhm.
But what if I say, hey, here's a few tips to make sure you have a blessed summer? You do have a physiological response, but it's not the same. It's not going to be the one that
You
captures
don't
you
feel
and
that
gets
in
you.
your
You
bones,
don't
right?
feel it. You don't feel the urgency of
Yeah.
needing to attune to what's going to be said. And like, there's this great study that was done. It said people who watch the news believe they are more likely to be victims in the world.
Mm,
I
mm,
mean, it's not even like they will be victims. It's a belief system that forms that they will become victims, and so they become more hyper vigilant to the possibility of being victimized.
mm.
So that's what they're attuning to in the world. They're not able to then focus on like all the gratitude or all the good things that are also happening in the world. And so we become, as a culture, again, limited. Like we're stuck on the TV channels of the negative. And we're all feeding off of that. We're working in that culture, and it is creating, like I said, an endemic of an addiction to drama. It's not a happy story,
Yeah,
but hopefully it captured your attention.
it certainly did. So, in the absence of shutting off the news, in the absence of getting off of all social media,
Sure.
like, in our last few minutes here, Scott, what in the world what are the tools that we have that we are armed with to be able to communicate with each other in
Yeah.
such a way that we are not stirring up drama, that we are, if we see somebody addicted to drama, that we are not getting sucked into that vortex of their stress response? What do we
Yeah.
have here?
Well, I'm going to throw one more wrench at you to
Please
answer
do.
that question.
Please do.
I'm going to normalize something. If someone's having a stress response, so are you. It's called stress contagion. Stress is the most contagious physiological state. The second one is love. Yeah, love is not the top one. Like if
Mm,
I'm feeling very lovey, you'll have a physiological response that releases some oxytocin as well, and it's cool, but it's not as strong and it's not as evolutionarily powerful as a stress response. So when you see someone in the throes of drama, you're physiologically mirroring them. And that's important to know.
mm,
So it's not the question of like, how do I get rid of them? But how do I go process through my nervous system what it is that I'm having a mirrored response of? So empowering yourself through mindfulness, through what's called somatics or mind body therapies, where you're becoming more attuned to your physiological states so that you have more agency. One of the things that happens in an attentional or stress economy is you lose agency of your own physiological awareness. Take back your power. Take back your power of what is happening in your body so that you have more choices. So that you go, I can watch 5 minutes of the news. And then I go, you know what? This is hitting a level of stress response that I no longer need. And I'm going to turn it off. Or, this person I'm around really feels like they're revving me up. And so I have options in there. I might say to them, love, I got 5 minutes to hear your story. Or I'm happy to listen to what happened from your experience. I don't want to hear a narrative of like what he said and then she said. These are all boundaries, but I suddenly begin to have enough agency or choice to start to enact those. When I regain my power of recognizing what's happening in my body and what I want in the world in relation to my physiological states.
So you're talking about physically feeling ourselves
Yeah.
and the response to certain situations. Am I characterizing that correctly?
I think you're doing a great job
Yeah.
of mirroring back what I said. So, yeah. So, if you're walking around, let's say, if you've ever done this, or do this with me as an exercise, like scrunch up your shoulders to your ears, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly release. Oh, and you might even notice, oh, I feel like I just relaxed even more than I was before.
100%.
Yeah. So you always had that level of stress or tension that was in your shoulders, but until you gained a sense of awareness by increasing the tension, called a pendiculation, and then releasing it, now you have more awareness of what's happening in your shoulders. That awareness starts to give you choice and power. So there are tons of practices in my book. You can go and look up somatics or on my platform, the Embody Lab. There are a lot of different ways of starting to empower you by being aware of what's happening in your body. And that is like the antidote of the power being taken away from us as part of this form of our economy. And the power that was often taken away from us for if we had trauma and had to essentially become dependent on on stress, on chaos, on crisis as a means of preservation and quote unquote safety. You know, what we're all trying to truly do is just come back home to ourselves. We are those who are addicted to drama, which is so many of us now.
Hmm.
When we stir things up, when we go gossip, when we create a bigger deal for no reason, when we go play that sad music, even though we're already sad, when we're flooding ourselves with feeling, when we're essentially chasing the drama to avoid our trauma or to avoid being with our underlying process, what is inherently a driver for all of us, even though we may not know, is the desire to come back home to ourselves, to occupy that void with ourselves.
Scott, you don't know what you just did. Several episodes ago now, I
Yeah.
had on a woman by the name of Raquel Garcia
Uh-huh.
who was addicted to drugs, alcohol, and at the end of our conversation, she said almost the exact same thing,
Mm.
that her entire process of after she went through a series of traumatic events,
Yeah.
sexual assault, death of friends, loss of her athletic career, she was just trying to go back to the thing that she felt most at home at as a child, which
Yeah.
was her neighborhood of friends
Yeah.
and family. You
Yeah.
just repeated the same thing in the
Mm.
context of an addiction to drama. And I even one of the notes that I took from your book was a fresh view of addiction recognizes that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but rather human connection.
Yeah. We want to feel
You gave me
ourselves.
chills, Scott. Like just that I mean, that puts a bow on it in such a way that I could never explain.
Yeah.
But please go ahead, finish your thought. I cut you off there.
Belonging isn't just with other people. When we live a childhood or a life where we feel like we are a walking ghost, where we feel disconnected, we don't belong to ourselves, let alone the other people around us or the world.
Mm,
That we find these moments of feeling this false sense of belonging by creating the same chaos around us as we feel inside of us. And when it is safe enough to be at peace within ourselves, to feel at home within ourselves, and to belong to ourselves, it is so much more accessible to feel like we can belong to the world and the people in it.
it's beautiful. Scott, last question for you here. What is a question that you wish you were asked more?
Mm, that's a great question. It's not a particular question, but it is follow-up questions. Like, I think that the thing that I feel most disappointed in, and like, not my friends, because I only find friends who are good at follow-ups. I wasn't kidding when I said like my kink is follow-up questions. Um, but like going on dates with people, and they'll ask a question and I'll like be really excited and share something, and then they're like, "Cool." And I'm like, "Wah,
Wah,
wah,
wah, wah.
wah, wah. You don't know how to ask a follow-up question." Where, like, I will ask, like, 50 questions in a row and, like, funnel it's like a whole funnel process of, like, getting into more detail and, like, "How does that connect to this that you said earlier?" Which may not be fun for other people, but I really enjoy it. So, it's not the question I wish I was asked, but the follow-up questions I wish I was more asked.
Well, hopefully, I accomplished my goal that I set out that
Ye
we discussed at the beginning of this conversation. But Scott, thank you so much. The book, the conversation today, just is enormously helpful, and where you landed that, I think is necessary and needed for people to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A huge shout out and thanks to Dr. Scott Lyons for sharing his perspective and his story on the show in this episode. Please do me and Scott a huge favor. Share this episode with someone you know who might be addicted to the drama, but actually share this episode with someone you know who might find just some value in listening to today's conversation. You don't have to actually say, "Hey, I think you should listen to this. I think you might be addicted to drama." Share this episode with your network. Help me and Scott spread the good word about the importance of asking more questions. And if you like the conversations with the amazing guests like Dr. Scott that I have on each and every episode, subscribe so that you never miss when a new episode drops. If you would ever like to get in touch with me, you can always email me at michael@thefollowupquestion.com, or you can go to my website, michaelashford.com, and reach out there. The link is in the show notes. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow-Up Question. And until then, keep asking questions.